welcome to this week's episode of Opera and Me. I'm your host, Robert Mellon. This week we've got international opera star, mezzo-soprano Kate Aldrich on the program. Kate is a native Mainer and an advisory trustee to Opera Maine. She joins us today from her home in Rome, Italy. Kate has sung at some of the largest opera houses in the world, including the Metropolitan Opera, San Francisco Opera, La Scala, the Salzburg Festival, the Rossini Festival, Teatro Real in Madrid, Bayerische Staatsoper, and Opernhaus Zurich. Her roles range from Baroque opera to bel canto opera to new works such as Great Scott and Dead Man Walking. It was truly a treat to speak with Kate today. The topics we cover, as you'll soon see, are what it was like to sing Carmen back in 2005 for Opera Maine, the differences between casting in Europe versus the United States, and we also talk about what it's like to have a family as a performer. So stay tuned, I hope you enjoy, and I'll see you on the other side. Okay, Kate Aldrich, thank you so much for coming and joining us today on Opera and Me. I'm so happy to have you. You sang with Opera Maine when it was still called Port Opera, and you sang the title role of Carmen in Carmen. And I was wondering, was this one of the first Carmens you had done? Had it happened before? And what was it like for you to dive into such an iconic role?
Well, actually, my first Carmen, to be honest, was at Mission Opera Theater in Detroit.
Oh.
But very, very early in my career. And I was sort of second cast, just had a couple of performances to sort of get my feet wet. And then a couple of years went by before I came to Opera Maine. But yeah, it was, being able to do it at Opera Maine was sort of, for me, the real beginning. Because of course, the Carmen that I did in Detroit was the first Carmen, but it was still, everything was new at the time. It was the very beginning of my career. I still feel like I was in a haze sometimes on stage with just the newness of everything and the stress essentially of performing. And so yeah, my memories of the time at Opera Maine it had a big imprint on me in terms of performing. I think partly because the role is so important, but Donovan was really important actually for me, dramatically speaking. She really was more interested in the dramatic stage piece aspect of it than she was of the vocal quality, even though the cast all were excellent singers. She really delved into that, which opened my eyes to, this is something we're going to be doing. Like, this is an element. So that was important for me.
Have you noticed since then through now, because I know you've done Carmen all over the world, has the character changed for you? Has it developed into something else, or have you kept the core of it the same?
No, I'm sure there are elements that are the same. I'm sure the heart of her is the same, but it's like, it's sort of like a painting. You start with sort of the sketch, and let's say Detroit for me was the pencil sketch of what I wanted the character to be. And then Opera Maine was when we really filled it in and you see the expression of the person that I'm drawing. But then with each time I do Carmen, and I don't even mean each production, I mean literally every performance that I do, every rehearsal, and you're adding new shadings and new colorings. And you take that with you keep that in your pocket, and then you might eliminate other things and say, oh, I don't feel it anymore. And because, we change and we evolve as people. So we're always adding new input.
Je ne parlerai plus. Près du rempart de Séville, chez mon ami Las Bastia, j'irai danser la Séville, boire du manzanilla. J'irai chez mon ami Las Bastia. Toutes seules on s'ennuie, et les vrais plaisirs sont à deux. Donc pour me tenir compagnie, je mènerai mon amoureux. Mon amoureux, il est un diable.
t'avais dit de ne pas me parler.
Je ne te parle pas, je chante pour moi-même, je chante pour moi-même. Et je pense, il n'est pas défendu de penser. Je pense à certains officiers, je pense à certains officiers qui m'aiment et comme autour, je pourrais bien aimer.
Carmen,
Mon officine épouse au capitaine, oh même lieutenant. Il n'est que brigadier, mais c'est assez pour une bohémienne. Et je daigne m'en contenter.
Carmen, je suis comme un homme ivre. Si je cède, si je me livre, ta promesse, tu la tiendras. Ah, si je t'aime, Carmen, Carmen, tu m'aimeras.
Oui,
Tu la fastia,
nous danserons
Le
la
forêt.
séguedille,
Carmen,
buvant du manzanilla.
le promets.
Près des remparts de Séville, chez mon ami la Spazia, nous danserons la séguedille, boirons du manzanilla. Tra-la-la-la-la-la-la-la-la-la, tra-la-la-la-la-la-la-la-la-la.
Your career has really, it took off, and you've had this incredible success not only here in the States but also over in Europe as well. Do you remember what your moment was in the U.S. that was that first big break where you were like, oh, my career's going in the right direction?
There were a couple of things I can remember. My career really got established, I would say, first sort of in Italy, which is strange because Italy is an incredibly difficult market to break into. And yet somehow I just sort of fell into it through a series of people that I had met and situations that I was put in the States. But I would say in the States, the sort of breakthrough moments for me, I would say that there were two. I think the first one was having met Domingo in Europe. He was doing a performance of Traviata, I believe. And somebody introduced us, and at the time looking for people to do Operalia. He was auditioning people for Operalia. And so I auditioned for Operalia, and that was how I met him. And then he hired me at Los Angeles Opera for a couple of seasons. And that really sort of put on the map, I think, in the States. And then at that point, some people started to take notice, and I was invited to do Carmen at New York City Opera, which I think was a big moment for me. I think people started to sit up a little bit and listen. And then, of course, getting a Met contract is always a sort of a calling card.
Do you notice a difference in the way people are cast in Europe versus in the United States, or is it pretty much equal across the board?
No, it's pretty different. So what I have noticed, in particular, and it's gotten even stronger, more strong lately, is that in the States, it's sort of like the sheen is very important. So the strong technical, solid voice, maybe not necessarily more than that vocally, but that the technique is there, and that the sort of image and the look and the everything is sort of up to par with this sort of way that it's supposed to be done. And it's not necessarily individualistic, sort of following a pattern. Now, this is obviously making it sound like I think it's better in Europe. And in some ways, what I do think is better in Europe is that the musicality is equally, if not more important to the actual technique of the voice, because obviously the technique is important because you can't express musicality if you do not have an instrument that is able to support that. So absolutely the technique is forefront, but I do think it is important to not lose sight of phrasing and expression and character, individualism as a performer and as the character that you're playing, and finding newness, freshness. Otherwise, it gets sort of stuck. I do think that the solidness of the school of technique in the States would be wonderful if we could somehow merge the two. Because I remember when I started my career, in Italy, in Verona, and I was in so over my head, and I didn't know it. And I had come out of a training program, a 2-year training program in Pittsburgh, and technique was solid as rock, and I was ready to go, and I knew the role so well, and I was so prepared. And I got there, and I realized there was so much more to it than that. And there was no way I could have just known that just by looking at the score, or because even if I had been taught in some kind of a class, it's really about just getting on the stage to really know it. So it may be a question of that there's maybe an older culture in Europe in terms of the opera world.
It's interesting that you say that. I made my European debut just this past fall, and it was the first taste of being around a German conductor and a director from Northern Europe, and a cast full of Europeans.
Oh, yeah.
And what they were requiring of the voice was stuff that I was never asked necessarily to do in the United States. And there was almost like a grittiness that they wanted. There was a character in the sound that's never demanded here in the States. And I find it so interesting bringing that up.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. And it's so exciting when you suddenly, because it's almost like a liberation when you discover I don't have to stay within these parameters. It's yes, of course, the technique, you have that as your base, and it's holding you up. But you can all jump out there and jump over there, and it's really freeing, I think.
Yeah, it's as if they're not looking for the voice to be necessarily lack beauty, okay? But there is this level of verismo in the sound that they want that really that it kind of I kind of agree with it in a way. It changes the element of the performance. I'm so happy you brought that up. It just made my day.
Oh, good. Well,
I thought I was going crazy.
I know, and then you come back, and you can still come back and bring that so grittiness. And it's not that it's somehow strange when you. I mean, I had already been singing in Europe for a long time when I sang at the Met, and it's just an added element.
You've sung at some some of the largest houses in the world. Do you notice the top houses in Europe, and then you just mentioned the Met and LA Opera? Is there a difference in the way the companies are? Let me try to phrase this question so I don't get either of us in trouble. Is there a certain vibe that's different from European houses, big houses, to American big houses?
Well, no, I mean, I think every country sort of has its things. Italy's big opera houses, things are very relaxed and low key when it comes to things like when rehearsal starts, and very individualistic, but yet on stage the audiences are intense, like they're scary. And France, things are very organized and orderly, but there's a lot of like warmth and heart. I don't know how else to put it. Germany, things are very structured, and the German-speaking world, they have these strange rehearsal times. They're catering, which I think is great. They're making sure to take care of their stage staff and people who are working within the theater, so that they can be able to take their kids to school in the morning and pick them up after school and be able to have that time with their families, which I think is wonderful. What it means for us when we're guesting is that we work from like 10 to 1 and then from like 6 to 9 in the evenings. You have this huge gap in the middle of the day where your adrenaline just tanks. So that's it's different. In the States, I think the best thing about working in the States, I love working in the States, is that you are so well taken care of. They have commissions essentially to make sure that you are comfortable and taken care of, and that's nice.
Have you noticed your singing or the way you approach the career having changed now having a family?
Yeah, I mean, it's no secret that I had some pretty intense vocal shifts during my pregnancy that took a while to sort of pull out of. So in terms of technically speaking, in terms of the body change that happens, and I also think it's not even just about the physical body. I think it's also the mental body, where my body sort of just knew we have to sort of create a division and create space also for this new emotional attachment to this child, because up until then my baby was my voice. And so I think that is a shift that happens for a lot of singers, and you can't put a finger on it, but it's very clearly there. The good news is it takes a while, but then you come back out of it and you have all this new discovered space in your body that you can use to support your voice that you didn't have access to before. I mean, you probably had access to it, but you didn't know how to find it. So that's kind of neat, but it takes a while to find it. And also I think the richness of life, of being a mother and having a family, it gives you so many more sfumature, so many more colors that you can pull for your voice, because you've experienced so many different new emotions that are what make life so rich.
I want to thank you so much for joining me today. Everybody sends their best from Maine. I too hope that you get back up there soon, and everybody else there. So thank you very much for joining me today. And
thank you so much.
And that'll do it for this week's episode of Opera and Me. Join us next week when we have tenor Bobby Brubaker on the program. If you haven't done so already, please like and subscribe to us on YouTube and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Opera Maine. To play us out this week, I've pulled a clip from the 2005 production of Carmen, where Kate sings the Habanera. I hope you enjoy, and see you next week.
L'oiseau que tu croyais surprendre a dit de l'aile s'envola. L'amour est loin, tu peux l'attendre, tu ne l'attends plus, il est là. Tout autour de toi, vite, vite, il vient s'en va, puis il revient. Tu crois tenir, vite, vite, tu crois l'éviter, il te tient. L'amour est en je t'aime, si je t'aime. Prends garde à toi. Si tu ne m'aimes pas, si tu ne m'aimes pas, je t'aime. Mais si je t'aime, si